I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, it's a packed house at San Diego City Hall where a controversial development proposal has sparked a spirited debate. Community members weigh in on the One Paseo project.
Should everyone who rides a bike in California be required to wear a helmet regardless of age? One state senator introduced a bill that says we should or face a fine. I'm Peggy Pico with why bicyclists have mixed feelings about the idea. But first, an iNewsSource investigation into a well-known San Diego lawyer turns up millions of dollars in questionable land deals and a bizarre letter denying there was a payoff to get rid of former Mayor Bob Filner.
We should talk about them, say their names, because you can bet that these guys don't want us to be timid and shy and forgetful. So,
honoring those who died in the line of duty, one community's message of thanks to living and past veterans. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. San Diego City Hall is packed tonight with 2 overflow rooms also full as City Council considers the One Paseo development proposal for Carmel Valley. KPBS North County editor Allison St. John is at City Hall where the testimony has been going on for several hours. Allison?
We've been here at City Hall since about 2 o'clock, so there's been testimony for about 4.5 hours, and it looks as though we'll have another couple of hours to go before the City Council actually vote. Now, this is a big project, the One Paseo project. It would, in fact, put 2 150-foot office towers and 600 housing units and retail and a cinema and a park, all on just a 23-acre lot on Del Mar Heights Road in Carmel Valley. The developers earlier today said this is one of the most progressive and sustainable projects that you will see in the San Diego. They say traffic will be mitigated by a state-of-the-art traffic light signal system. The opponents, though, are saying this is much too big a project for this area. It is more suitable to somewhere like downtown's East Village. It's car-centric. There's no public transit. It's not smart growth. So we also heard from the 2 cities, Del Mar and Solana Beach. The mayor spoke up and said I-5 won't have any expansions for the next decade, so it will affect traffic on I-5. So this is going to be a difficult vote, and we'll let you know. You can check the web to find out what happened or go to KPBS Radio tomorrow morning on Morning Edition, and we'll tell you the result. This is Allison St. John reporting live from City Hall.
A KPBS and Voice of San Diego investigation has brought a landlord under scrutiny. He's accused of renting apartments with roaches, mold, and other problems. It turns out some of those units are part of a federal program to house low-income residents. Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks joins us with more on this. First, remind us who this landlord is.
Well, Bankim Shah owns about 90 buildings and manages apartments for several other property owners. We found he had 62 code compliance complaints at his buildings, and in some cases those conditions persisted even after city inspectors came out to his properties.
Megan, you also found Shah was receiving taxpayer money for housing the poor?
Correct. Shah rents apartments to Section 8 tenants. So some of his tenants pay a portion of the rent and then the federal government picks up the rest. Shah received more than $500,000 in public subsidies last year. We spoke with one of his tenants who receives rental assistance.
It's still in there. I put freezing cold stuff down in there to try to keep things cold. And it's been 3 months. I've done everything. I've defrosted it, cleaned it, put a hose on the back, leveled it. This time it froze over in the back. So the water trays I put in 2 days ago, and the water still is not frozen off. I mean, it's barely a little on the top of it. But if I don't keep stuff up here, it goes bad fast.
When you first moved in, did the heater even turn on? Did it work at all?
No. I had them all checked by SDG&E, and they would not let it be turned on. They did not work right. The valves were both bad. They leaked.
So there was a gas leak in here?
Yeah. The little valve was on off. It was leaking gas right out of the valve at the top.
Could you smell it?
Yeah. With Section 8 housing, it should be all health regulated, you know, but it is what it is.
Well, like he says, shouldn't these apartments be regulated?
Yes, O'Shea's apartment passed an initial inspection by the San Diego Housing Commission. However, follow-up inspections validated all of O'Shea's complaints: a gas leak, busted oven and fridge, roaches, and maggots. All of these conditions violate federal standards for Section 8 rentals. A representative for the Housing Commission had no comment on that seemingly botched first inspection, but said her agency responded appropriately once O'Shea asked for help. We learned the Housing Commission does not do background checks on the landlords it does business with, and the commission does not screen rental listings that appear on its website. A review of their website showed Shaw had advertised 15 of his units. The majority had histories of code complaints against them.
KPBS reporter Megan Burks. The state wants to step up efforts to fight crime with 2 new bills targeting illicit profits of transnational criminal organizations. One of those bills allows law enforcement to use wiretaps to investigate financial fraud. The other would freeze the assets of criminal organizations. California is the biggest point of entry for methamphetamine into the U.S. Cranes and cargo moving once again at West Coast ports tonight. After a drawn-out labor dispute, the dock workers union and their managers reached a tentative agreement. It includes a 5-year contract for workers at all 29 West Coast ports, and those close to the talks say the contract includes a new system for resolving labor conflicts. The debate is heating up over a free trade proposal in Congress. San Diego leaders are rallying against it. Civic and religious leaders today joined Congressman Juan Vargas. They're upset over a proposed measure called Fast Track. It would restrict Congress to a yes or no vote on trade deals from Asia to Europe. Vargas says it allows the president to negotiate deals with no transparency.
So we actually don't know what are in these trade deals, and we don't get to know until he brings it to Congress. And then when he brings it to Congress, there's only a very short period of time to take a look at it. But you can't amend it. You can't change it.
He says the measure would ship jobs overseas and hurt workers' rights. Supporters include many congressional Republicans. They say it's key to a partnership of 12 nations that make up 40% of the global economy. Peggy Pico has details of an investigative report from our media partner iNewsSource about a well-known San Diego lawyer and questionable land deals.
Cory Briggs' name may sound familiar. He's one of San Diego's best-known environmental attorneys, and he's known for suing developers and government agencies for violating environmental law. An iNewsSource investigation into Briggs raises questions about millions of dollars in land deals made through his law corporation. A group of legal experts believe the deals are questionable and possibly fraudulent. iNewsSource reporter Brad Racino joins me now to explain. And Brad, I mentioned the name Cory Briggs. He's familiar to people, at least his name is. Tell us more about him.
Sure. He's made a name for himself, as you said in your intro, over the last 10 years or so in San Diego. He sues project developers and government agencies. He sues them a lot. He sued the city more than 50 times. He's sued over the TOT tax, the Harbor Island Hotel, the Navy Broadway complex, the B Street cruise ship terminal. So he's known for suing over these environmental violations and suing under CEQA, or the California Environmental Quality Act. And he's also known as one of the first 3 people to publicly call for Mayor Bob Filner's resignation in 2013.
Sure, and tell us about that. So
Sure.
he was one of the first 3.
Yeah, that's him right there in the middle, walking up to the podium. And at a news conference back in 2013, it was him and former City Councilwoman Donna Fry and another attorney, Marco Gonzalez, who called on Filner to resign.
What did your investigation uncover in regards to land transactions with Briggs' law firm?
Sure. So these are all about deeds of trust. Commonly, they're mortgages, but not always. What happens is if you need $500,000 to buy your home, you enter into a deed of trust with usually a bank, and they'll give you the $500,000. But until you pay it back, they have a lien on your home. They can take that home if you don't pay it back. What we found is that Briggs Law Corporation has been entering into these deeds of trust with a number of different people in 4 different counties in Southern California over the last 8 years or so. And it seems a little bit strange to our experts who we spoke with that a law corporation is entering into deeds of trust, into these liens on houses. Two of these liens really stuck out, and they were on homes in LA County and San Bernardino, I believe, County, on homes that were worth a fraction of the cost. They were $1.5 million liens. So this one home had, I think it was worth about $679,000 at the time the lien was issued. The other home was worth about $378,000, but with $1.5 million liens taken out on them with no title company between just the owner of the house and Briggs Law Corporation.
Well, this could seem like just a bad investment. Is there really anything wrong with lending people a lot of money against the value of their home?
Well, we spoke to a bunch of experts about this, and they all latched on to these two deeds. They were executed on the same day, like I said, to two members of the same family back in 2013. And they said that they have seen things like this before in different schemes where a person may be trying to hide assets from a creditor. Say you enter into bankruptcy and that creditor sees that your home is encumbered by a $1 million lien. They're not going to come after that home because it's a pain for them. Mm-hmm. So what usually happens at the end of that, once the creditor goes away, the lien is lifted, and no money actually ever really changed hands unless there was a fee paid for that service to be had.
And you actually, one of your colleagues actually went to Briggs about this question, correct?
Right. My colleague Brooke Williams and I sat down with Briggs about 2 weeks ago, and as soon as we began asking questions about his business practices, he made us shut off the camera. Here's my colleague Brooke Williams asking Briggs a question about this.
We also see that you you help people set up companies and LLCs and serve as their registered agent. Why did your law firm get into that side of the business?
I'm just curious. Let's just turn this off for a sec, okay? Just turn it all off.
So he turns off the camera, mm-hmm. and then what happens?
Well, we tried to follow up. Actually, we left his office and drove north to the homes of these people who had their liens. They wouldn't talk to us on the phone, so we wanted to show up and ask them about them. And they wouldn't speak to us. One of them slammed the door, the other wouldn't answer. And then about 5 days later, we received this strange letter here, actually delivered to iNewsSource through KPBS, and here it is. And basically in it, they accuse me of harassing them, and they make a reference to a possible payoff to get rid of former Mayor Bob Filner. And here's what they say in the letter. Brad Racino has repeatedly harassed us and other family members with the accusation that we paid an attorney millions of dollars to get rid of San Diego Mayor Bob Filner and made impolite demands that we talk with him about this absurd theory.
So this sounds a little confusing. You were talking to him about the mortgage things, mm-hmm. and then you get this letter. So what do these $3 million in mortgages actually have to do with former Mayor Bob Filner stepping down?
That's a good question. Like I said, we never mentioned Filner to these people on the phone or in person. The only thing we can think of is that when we did sit down with Briggs, we did ask him why he issued $3 million in these liens, these strange liens to families on the same day, and that day happened to be 5 days after former Mayor Bob Filner announced his resignation. But that was the only time we ever brought that up. So.
All right, more to come on this, I'm sure. You can read about this at inewssource.org. Brad Racino, thanks so much.
Thank you.
They're preparing for a combat emergency. Camp Pendleton Marines testing their ability to deploy 50,000 troops. The goal? To prepare military leaders to execute combat operations at a moment's notice. It's the first time this exercise has been carried out in more than a decade. The last time was during the Iraq War in 2003. A touring photo exhibit has made a stop in the community of Alpine to honor our California military members who've died in combat since 9/11. Rafael Peralta joined the Marines after graduating from Morris High School in San Diego. He died in Iraq in 2004 and was awarded the Navy Cross for saving the lives of two of his comrades. Joseph W. Perry was an Army sergeant who grew up in Alpine. He died in combat in Iraq in 2006. And San Diegan Rich Doria was also in the Army. He died fighting in Iraq in 2006.
It naturally feels like it should be a sad, emotional, whisper, don't talk about them type thing. But it should be, we should talk about them, say their names, because you can bet that these guys don't want us to be timid and shy and forgetful. So
710, that's the number of fallen military heroes represented on this display. 77 are from San Diego County and include both men and women. Tom Williams is a Camp Pendleton Marine whose parents came up with the idea for the photo exhibit as a way to say thanks to those young 20-somethings who voluntarily gave their lives to serve this country.
The mission of Remembering Our Fallen is to establish a national memorial, so one for every state and U.S. territory. Have a national unveiling in Washington, D.C., Memorial Day 2016.
Vietnam vet Dan Foster established the Alpine Wall of Honor nearly 6 years ago outside the local community center as a thank you to both living and past military vets.
It means everything to me, and it means so much to everybody else. It's a very powerful statement that this town of Alpine cares, that we care, and it's huge, and it's touched a lot of lives.
You can see the exhibit and the Wall of Honor for free this Saturday at the Alpine Community Center. There are 23 picture frames that make up the California portion of the touring exhibit, the largest number of fallen heroes from any state. Adult bicyclists here in California would be the first in the nation required to wear helmets while cycling if a bill introduced last week moves forward. Peggy Pico has more.
In addition to the all-ages helmet law, Senate Bill 192, introduced by State Senator Carol Liu, would require those riding at night wear reflective clothing. Either violation would result in a $25 fine. Current California law requires bicyclists under age 18 to wear helmets. Here with a look at both sides of the debate are my guest, Andy Hanshaw, Executive Director of the San Diego County Bike Coalition, and Dr. Michael Seiss, Medical Director of Trauma at Scripps Mercy Hospital. And Dr. Seiss, the California Highway Patrol reports nearly 14,000 bicyclists were hurt in traffic accidents in 2012. That was up from previous years. What are the most common types of bicycle injuries you see, and how serious are they?
Well, we see a number of injuries that are incredibly serious, from fractures, wrist, arms. Usually it's upper body because you're launched off the bike, either over the handlebars or off to the side. Or if you're hit by a car, your upper body lands on the car itself. And unfortunately, too often, it involves head injury. And that's why we feel so strongly that helmets are an incredibly important part of an overall approach to bike safety that includes traffic separation and a whole lot of other things.
Sure, and you mentioned upper body, but would you support a mandatory helmet law for adults?
Yes, I would.
Even though it's just taking care of the head?
I would support it because it's the difference between surviving an injury and ending up with permanent brain damage or dying from the injury.
I see. And Andy, I understand you don't support a mandatory helmet law. How come?
Well, first of all, at the San Diego County Bike Coalition, we have obviously a very high priority on cyclist safety, and we teach helmet use and encourage it in our programs and our outreach. It's not about that. It's about the mandatory helmet law for everyone all the time. I think that the evidence is unclear whether mandatory laws, and by the way, no states in the U.S. have one currently, it's unclear whether those have been effective in reducing trauma rates, but we do know that implementing mandatory helmet laws in other countries has resulted in a reduction of ridership overall. So less people riding for whatever, because it was a mandated law. Places like in France and Canada are the two countries that I'm looking at.
Okay, let me ask you this, though. Do you think there's a better approach? You sort of touched on it a little bit as far as bike safety here in San Diego County.
Absolutely, and there's a lot that we're doing on that front, but preventing the collisions from occurring is where we need to focus, and that is really working on our built environment, creating the separation for cyclists on our roadways, creating two significant things happened legislatively last year. The 3-foot passing bill, which requires motorists to give 3 feet. And we've also done a Protected Bikeways Act. And a protected bikeway is something that's physically separated from traffic through a barrier or some other means. And there's a lot of investment that's happening through our regional bike plan to make that sort of infrastructure happen. We'd like it to happen sooner, and we need to make it happen in order to get more people to ride. And the data shows, especially when you build that infrastructure in places like Washington, D.C., in New York City, where they have done that, that ridership does go up. And when ridership goes up, our streets become safer.
Because?
Because it's a safety in numbers thing, because it's traffic calming, because they provide that separated infrastructure, because they look at things like the rate of speed and they slow down, they do traffic calming measures. These are the types of things. So rather than putting the emphasis on the rider's safety, and it is important, let's make a safe environment for the riders to ride in.
Let me get back to the helmets, Dr. Seiss. 91% of bicyclists who died in reported accidents in 2009 were not wearing helmets. That's according to the National Conference of State Legislatures report. But today we learned of a woman here in San Diego who had a bike-to-bike collision. She was wearing a helmet, but she suffered serious head trauma despite wearing the helmet. So my question to you is, how effective are helmets in surviving cycling accidents?
Well, just like a motorcycle crash, the helmet does not totally protect you. If you're going fast enough, that crumple zone or shock absorbing effect of the helmet is not enough, you could get into real trouble. They're not perfect. Andy's absolutely right. It's not just about the helmet. It's about the whole bike, traffic, safety, separation, riding in safety zones, but helmets are also an important part of it. One of the problems is you don't know when you're going to get hit, when you're going to get clipped, when you're riding your bike. So you can't predict what's safe to ride with a helmet and what's not safe to ride without safe with. So it should be something to become second nature. It doesn't completely protect you. Everything that Andy's mentioned is incredibly important. But we think that step of wearing a helmet is an integrated approach to cutting down on injury.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so there's a lot more on our website, kpbs.org. Dr. Michael Seiss and Andy Hanshaw, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next News Hour, kick off the week on a political foot with Nia Malika Henderson and Amy Walter. That's Monday on the PBS News Hour.
The DNA floating through your veins doesn't only belong to you. It also contains what some scientists have called alien DNA. New tests can isolate that DNA and tell patients a lot about their health. Pregnant women are the first to benefit from these tests, but KPBS science reporter David Wagner says they've also been the first to deal with their limitations.
Melanie Christie's 14-month-old son, Zachary, has no trouble keeping up with the family dog while playing in a Claremont park.
Foxy!
He's a healthy, energetic toddler. But before Zachary was born, doctors were concerned he might not turn out so healthy.
Wow.
Christy had already had 3 miscarriages before getting pregnant with him at 36.
When I saw my doctor, she, because of my age and because of my history, suggested that we do a maternity 21 test.
Christy had never heard of Maternity 21, made by a San Diego company called Sequinome. The doctor explained it would use just a sample of her blood to screen for Down syndrome and other chromosomal problems.
We went over to the lab and they drew blood right away to send off for the test.
In about a week, a nurse called Melanie with the results. The fetal DNA in her bloodstream looked perfectly normal. The test even revealed the sex of the fetus months before an ultrasound could.
The test was very accurate. Our son is very healthy and smart and bouncy, and he's great. We're so happy.
For Christy, one big perk was getting to skip amniocentesis, an invasive procedure that carries a very small but real risk of miscarriage.
1, 2, 3. Whoa.
Amnio used to be the go-to method for diagnosing Down syndrome. But when tests like Maternity 21 became available in 2011, that started to change.
We've now seen almost a 70% drop in amniocentesis throughout the United States.
Scripps Health's chief academic officer, Eric Topol, chalks that up to steep cuts in the cost of genetic sequencing. It's now easy to take a vial of blood and isolate DNA that doesn't match a patient's own DNA.
There's a lot of other different types of alien DNA that shouldn't be in a tube of blood, like it could be a bacteria or a virus, or it could be the first sign of cancer.
Early onset Alzheimer's, risk of premature heart attacks. Topol says looking at the DNA in our veins can uncover a whole lot more than Down syndrome.
We haven't even touched the boundaries of where this can go.
But tests like Maternity 21 aren't perfect. John Tarosi oversees prenatal diagnosis for Kaiser Permanente in Northern California. At a recent San Diego conference, he presented data on their shortcomings. Companies like Sequinome say their results are more than 99% accurate, but a significant number of Tarosi's patients weren't getting results at all.
When patients get the blood tests, and if they don't get a result, that's really a high-risk group. We found almost 15% of that group had a chromosome abnormality.
So getting no answer is actually cause for concern. Other results can be even more confusing. Tarosi says results for younger women flagging a rare and deadly condition called Patau syndrome are more likely to be wrong than right.
The marketing is ahead of the science, and in the early studies it showed very high sensitivity, but if you factor back in the no results patients, the sensitivity is somewhat lower. It's still a good test, but it's not 99%, it might be 90%.
There's a lot at stake when these tests deliver false positives. The New England Center for Investigative Reporting recently found that incorrect results have even led to abortions.
Take your shoes off, huh?
Melanie Christie understands test results aren't always accurate, but in her case, they were.
1, 2, 3. Voila! I prefer having the power of knowledge beforehand so I can prepare myself for what's to come.
For most women, that's exactly what these tests do. Based on her experience, Christy would recommend it to anyone who asks. David Wagner, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.